Well, good morning. Tony Virtue speaking, Virtue and Partners with our regular monthly update. And obviously come up to Christmas and probably more importantly, the end of the decade. Where did those 10 years go? So I thought it'd be good to just look back over the last 10 years, look at some of the major trends. I think these days we're so fixated with overnight markets and short-term decisions. It really is important to look at things over a decade and get a better feel for what's really going on and to make long-term decisions. Decade began obviously coming out of the GFC. It had been a very difficult time. It had been a time when really we had to start again in many, many ways. So interest rates globally really fell to zero effectively in the US. Very cheap money. The effect of that was equities have done very well over the decade, as you can see. Property, again, as you'd expect, would do very well. Covering the three main themes from my point of view, the first one is really the growth in technology and really personified by the mobile phone, which is much more now than a mobile phone, obviously. It's a great way of having all this information effectively at our fingertips. It's making us far, far more efficient in what we're doing, whether it's paying bills, whether it's working out a map where we're going to. It's also leading to deflation because what it is meaning is a substantial amount of knowledge is available at a very cheap price. That's only going to continue to grow, and if you look at particularly the US companies, the FANGs, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Apples, etc., you can see that those kind of businesses have done extremely well over that decade, and in many cases they were just a twinkling in someone's eye 10, 20 years ago. So it does go to show that new technology really can drive new businesses, and in many ways it's easier to start from scratch than it is to resurrect an older business. The second area I would say, and you can see it in my presentation there, is the growth of China and just how beholden Australian exports are to China, but to the region more generally. And we are incredibly, incredibly fortunate that we have the fastest growing part of the world on our doorstep. It is one of the reasons we've had 28 years of uninterrupted economic growth. We haven't had a recession as defined by 2 negative quarters in that 28 years. It is slowing down at the moment. There is no question out there that there's a level of nervousness out there, but over the decade it's been a good decade for us there. The third area I'd pick up on is what I call the gig economy, the growth of the Airbnbs, the growth of the Ubers. Again, businesses that weren't established 10 years ago were seen to be marginal, but now a higher and higher part of our community is utilising those services. In many ways, it's their main job. Their job is 4 or 5 little sub-jobs, gig economies. They travel, they live well. The days of 48 weeks for 48 years, and then you retire and die for 2 years later, and you only have the one job all your life. Well, that's all gone. And very much everyone is working for themselves these days, even if it's just having the one employer as their customer. So quite a change in dynamics. The overall effect of that is that there has been a wealth effect, particularly in Australia. If you look on the graphs there, obviously properties have grown substantially over a decade, as have equities. So we are a much wealthier country as a whole. How that's distributed, how we think about some of the many issues we're dealing with at the moment is another question to ask. And as I present this morning, we have fires all around us in Sydney, and my thoughts go out to everybody. So there are real issues. In the very short term, the Trump-China circumstance seems to be playing itself out. He put some tariffs on Brazil, Argentina, possibly France earlier in the week, which has led to some volatility. It seems to be calming down now. But more generally, I think it's a kind of time for reflection, for peace, for looking back over the decade. We have our client function next week. I very much look forward to seeing many of you here in Manly. But for now, happy Christmas, a safe New Year from Tony Virtue, where experience pays.